Coming up on this episode of the Mario Rosenstock podcast.
The thing about power is power has tentacles. Power has voice. Power has control. Power has access. So the minute you start pushing at it, all of those things come at you. And suddenly you're under attack for speaking truth to power.
Brendan Ogle is one of Ireland's best-known activists and trade unionists. Having fought Margaret Thatcher and her plans to privatise the railways in the UK, Brendan returned home to Ireland in the early 90s and has been fighting for workers' rights and social justice ever since. He's now decided that it's time to move from protest to politics and try to effect a change as a member of the European Parliament. Brendan is always a compelling podcast guest. He's a real character and he speaks with such conviction. I remember having him on many times on Mario's Sunday Roast when that programme was on air. He's got loads of war stories from the decades he has spent in the trade union movement, and given that he's running for election, it's clear that he has plenty of fight left in him yet.
And people had said to me, would you ever run for politics? Would you be interested in politics? And it never felt like the right time. It didn't feel like the right time now either. But I needed to feel alive. When you come across injustice, to kick down at somebody who is in a worse position than you is human, understandable and utterly pointless. And we get a whole load of people who are disadvantaged going around kicking out and lashing out at each other.
And the only people who aren't being kicked are the people at the very top.
And it suits the people at the very top. Human decency overrides everything. There's nothing humanly indecent about me not paying my water bill. It's a bad law. The only way to stop it is not to do it. But there is something humanly indecent about somebody turning up outside somebody's family home. Because the only intention is to intimidate. If it wasn't to intimidate, they wouldn't do it. If I'd known the path that I was going on, I'm 56 years of age now. Maybe I was a bit stupid, actually. I'm not sure I would have picked this path. For all of the good experiences I've had, I'm not sure I would have picked it.
My full chat with Brendan Ogle coming up after we exclusively reveal to you just some of the voicemails that Donald Trump has been receiving over the last few days since he was found guilty of falsifying his business records. Here's just a few of the messages because he received so many, we've just had to sift through the ones from Irish people alone.
You've reached the voicemail of Donald J. Trump. For donations, press 1. To apply for the vice presidency, press 2. Otherwise, leave your name and number, and I will endorse this message. Yeah.
Hi, Donald. It's Miriam O'Callaghan here from RTE in Ireland. We met once before down in Doonbeg, I think. I'm ringing just to see on the off chance if you wouldn't mind giving an interview to Prime Time next week about your potential impending incarceration. We think it's a really, really interesting story. We know you have great ties with Ireland and how you feel about potentially doing community service and having an ankle bracelet attached to your body would be horrifying, genuinely interesting.
Donald be Jesus in Begara, it is Michael Flatley here, one of your greatest supporters, calling you from Ireland, but soon to be going over to Chicago, to be raising money and donations for yourself in the name of all people from Chicago who came from Ireland and love Donald Trump. Begabs, I'm willing to do an owl dance or an owl extravaganza or an owl fundraiser for you myself if it takes it, because what they've done to you is something horrible. The way people begrudge the success of people, it just never ever ceases to amaze me. Begabs, me dancing feet and me flute are behind you, Donald, for as long as you need it. Ganairi on Boherlet. How are you, Donald? Bertie Ahern here calling from Ireland. I think that I've been looking at the figures there, and 130 grand of falsifying business records. I think it's way off the mark. I don't see how they came up with them numbers at all. I mean, it was clear what you were doing was clearly a business expense, and I feel sympathy for you at that level. But anyway, I may be thinking of running for something next year myself, and as one potential president to another, I'd like to know that there's no ill will between the two countries. Thanks. Hi, Donald. It's Dan Healy here. I'm head of a radio station in Ireland called 2FM. A number of leading presenters have actually walked out on us in the last number of weeks, and we really don't have anybody fronting our daytime or breakfast or evening schedule. Anyway, that led to a kind of a crazy, zany idea on my half. I thought maybe if you're free, we might have mutual interests in the sense of you maybe presenting a drive time show or maybe a breakfast show. We could do it by Zoom. We could be doing remotely. Listen, I don't know what your outside interests are, but we do have a registry of interests which you would have to fill out before joining 2FM. But anyway, it's going great over here. So, we don't really need you because we're just inundated with great presenters like Lottie Ryan. But in the event that Lottie and maybe Lottie and yourself could do a little double act, that would be great. Lottie and Donnie, that would be good. Thanks, Donald. Donald, give us a call. Thanks.
Donald Trump's voicemails only on the Mario Rosenstock podcast, where you can get exclusive comedy every week. And don't forget, if you want to see me live, I am doing my biggest show ever, Friday, March 28th, 2025 in the 3 Arena. Tickets are on sale now on Ticketmaster. Well, Brendan Ogle is best known for his activism around workers' rights, social justice, the trade union movement, and any other causes he believes fighting for. But as a proud Dundalk man, his other passion in life is Dundalk FC, and that's where we kick things off. Or should I say, that's where Steve Staunton there kicked things off.
So, Brendan, how are Dundalk doing there?
Woeful to the world.
Wow.
Although we beat St Patrick's Athletic last
Well,
night.
everybody's beating Stephen Kenny.
Kenny versus Kenny. His son come on as a sub for Dundalk.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
great.
Dundalk were a bit of a banana skin.
Are we on air now?
We are, mate. You're live to the nation there.
Great.
Sorry,
Dundalk,
this
Dundalk
is Steve
like a
Staunton
roller
here,
coaster.
talking to me old fellow, Brendan Ogle.
I went to school with Stephen and he doesn't speak out like that.
He does, because I'm speaking to him now. I'm speaking through him. So I am.
But being a Dundalk fan is a roller coaster, and we're on the dip at the moment.
You're on the dip. Yeah. Where are you in the league?
Oh, we're in 9th.
Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, the days of Jim McLaughlin are
We were 10th for a long time.
long gone now.
Maybe we've hit bottom and what.
On the way up, on the dip. Yeah. Brendan, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. You're running in Dublin as an MEP candidate.
I'm running, yeah.
Go on.
Well, there's not as much running as people have suggested. It's my first time and it's been a journey. A couple of people were suggesting we'd be running away from all these mad, furious, angry people.
Okay.
That hasn't happened.
Has it not?
No.
Well, maybe because everybody likes you, Brendan.
I'm not sure that's the case.
Well, they care. You care about people.
The poll numbers don't suggest that that's the case. But certainly, yeah, I talked to you about that. People, and I listened to some of your other podcasts with other candidates, and, all this toxicity stuff, it's on computers as far as I can make out. And also the bit of running that hasn't really happened is, and it's great, thanks for having me on, but the amount of debating is very, very little for a debate. I've had a couple of minutes on the state broadcaster. I had a good old interview with a national radio station, none at all with another national radio station, or 2 other national radio stations. And I actually found myself in a situation last week where we independents had to create our own debate. So we got the 7 Dublin non-party independents out to DCU, and an old friend of yours, Vincent Brown,
Did he?
came and hosted
He moderated.
a debate.
How is Vincent?
Well, moderated now would be...
Well, he never he's not moderated about anything.
He hasn't lost any of his
Lash.
sharpness. It's
Yeah.
a nice,
Really?
it's a nice word. Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
Has his bronchitis.
And we were his bronchitis. It's okay. His voice was strong.
Oh, good.
Yeah, his voice was strong, and his mind was certainly strong.
Should he be on television again?
He should never have been off it.
Yeah.
Television has gone downhill in this country since Vincent went off it in all sorts of ways.
I know.
Desperate.
I
Your appearances have reduced as well since Vincent.
That's because he's not on. I used to do him doing me.
Yeah, that's right.
He is missed, yeah, but I'm glad to hear he's well.
I thought that was interesting that we had to create that debate ourselves because nobody was talking to the independent candidates, and the opinion polls are telling us that people want independence, and that's certainly what I'm getting.
It's on the polls are saying that as
You
well.
go up with people with leaflets and they say, "What party are you?" "No party, I'm independent." "Oh, I'll take that."
Okay.
It's sort of, if you're a party that,
They don't like parties.
less so.
Yeah.
They're not in a party mood.
No.
The people of Dublin are not in a party mood.
No.
Not at the moment.
Yeah. They just see maybe they see parties as toxic, and they see individuals potentially as independent and believing in something.
Yeah, well, look there's a lot of anger out there about the issues, in the sense that people are walk around the city, the homelessness issue, the lots of issues that we can talk about, but people are justifiably angry. And my view of that is we've had two parties running the state for 100 years, not 10 or 12. And some cynics might say they're kind of more or less one party.
I don't think you're cynics to say that. Everybody sort of basically now, that game is up. The ruse is over now.
So if you wanted to stretch it, then you could say we've had a single party state for 100 years.
That's a dictatorship.
and people are thinking, the parties, they associate it.
I would have thought you'd like dictatorships though, Brendan. Hence, with your graft for communism and
who said
totalitarian? Me, I did.
For communists,
I did. Yeah. Well, you do. And if I picked the surface really clearly now, you'd find a little.
You'd be very surprised now at my views, because and really that's why I did this. Yeah. I've had a tough 5 years.
Yes. So I see.
And tough isn't the word actually. And I needed something to feel alive again. And people had said to me in the past, at previous times when maybe my name might have been more out there. Would you ever run for politics? Would you be interested in politics? And it never felt like the right time. It didn't feel like the right time now either. But I needed to feel alive. And I needed to put my values out there. And that was a challenge, because I decided to develop a website which would, in my own name, brendanogle.ie, which would encapsulate the things I've been involved in for the last 25 years or so. Mm-hmm. And they're all value driven. My values anyway. If people don't like them, that's fine. But I wanted my values to be available. To be recorded, if you like. And then I kind of decided, well, I want to do something meaningful and put them to the test. And the timing couldn't have been worse for a few reasons, but I'm really passionate about the European Union and what could happen and what's not happening. So I decided to go for it, and I do feel alive. Definitely. It's been great that way. It's been great meeting people again, talking to people. And, nearly the vast majority of people you actually meet, whether they agree with you or not, are basically nice.
I agree. I'm a positive person. I see 80% of people as being great.
They're nice. And they might come up and they might say little jokes, or might make it clear they don't want to vote for you, or they wouldn't touch you with a barge pole, or they disagree with you and everything, but they're still nice. There's very little actual not nice stuff around. There is some, but it's very little. So that's been great, because COVID kept us locked up. I was locked up for grief. I've been locked up for 5 years effectively in different ways. So to get out there, and it's been good for my confidence, which had taken a battering. So it's been good for my confidence to just get talking to people again, and to be testing ideas and testing opinions and listening to other people's opinions and seeing where they meet.
And just before we move on to talking about you, which I want to spend most of the podcast talking about,
okay,
where do we stand at the moment? Because this podcast is going to go on within 20 hours of us making it.
Great, hurry up.
Because of the moratorium.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask, how do you feel about the election on Friday? Is it your first official election?
Yes.
Yeah. And how do you feel about that? Are you nervous or?
No. Mm-hmm. I was a bit nervous about getting out there again.
Yeah.
I'm not nervous about any outcomes or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I'm realistic. Mm-hmm. I'm a first-time candidate, doing it from my bedroom with a small team of friends and family. Just to give it some scale, I have 150 posters across the whole of Dublin. It cost me a few bob. Labour have 5,000. Fine Gael have 10,000. Or Fianna Fáil have 10,000. I don't know many Fine Gael have. I imagine Sinn Féin, because there's two candidates, have even more than that. So that's the scale.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm not nervous. I'll be disappointed when it's over, which again is refreshing, because I thought, I'll get into this and I'll hate it and I'll be counting down the hours and then I'll be thinking, oh, great, can I go somewhere sunny now it's over? I'm going to be disappointed when it's over.
Okay. Because you've loved being around people again.
I feel that I'm engaging again in a way that I haven't been able to since because of various reasons.
Yes.
COVID being one as well, since 2019, and that's been really good for me. Yeah, yeah. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen is people are going to vote. I'm going to vote, and we can on Sunday, the council Sunday,
and we can probably predict who will get in broadly, without maybe down to the last seat.
Probably.
Who do you think will get in?
Well, I think
in Dublin.
I think Lynn Boylan of Sinn Féin will get in. Mm-hmm. She was an excellent MEP in the past.
Okay.
I think it looks like Barry Andrews will get in.
Right.
It looks like Regina Doherty will get in.
Okay, and then there's this last seat.
Yeah. Then there's a last one.
There'll be a bit of a scrap for that.
I'd say so.
Who would you see as the contenders for that?
Well, apart from me, obviously.
Okay.
He says, grimacing. I think, Claire Daly's an incumbent.
Yes.
I think Daithí Doolan is a second Sinn Féin seat, so that would depend on Lynn's transfers. Yeah. I think Eoin O'Riordan has put up a strong campaign.
Okay.
I think Sinead Gibney, Kieran Cuff is topped the poll the last time.
Right.
So there's a bit of a judgment.
Niall Boylan came on this podcast.
I was listening to it this morning coming in the car.
What the hell is that about?
I know he was.
Go on. Well, that says a million words, that expression.
Well, look, there's people who talk and there's people who do.
Okay.
I do. Niall talks.
Okay.
He's a great talker.
All right, and he
You had a great chat with him.
I did, but he reckons he has a good chance of getting the fourth seat.
He has a chance.
Yeah. Do you think that, just in regarding his candidature, for just briefly, do you think he is... everybody seems to really be quick to kind of go, you're far right, you're far right, you're far right. I personally don't see that. Do you?
Well, I think people are very quick to label.
Yeah.
You done it to me in 2 minutes there.
I did.
Yeah. That's Irish. That's Ireland for you.
No, it's not. That's everywhere.
Yeah, okay, but we're in Ireland, so it's being everywhere doesn't exclude Ireland. It includes Ireland.
Yeah.
So you know that when you do that to someone, that kind of closes down the debate,
I suppose.
And I agree with Niall on that point.
Okay,
that's probably the end of the points in which I agree with Niall.
All right, okay.
I think to just say someone is this and someone is that is lazy.
Okay,
but I did listen to as much of it as I could take.
Yeah.
And his talking points are a very respectable version of far-right talking points. But he does it very well and he does it very smoothly and he's a very talented communicator.
Yes.
And, you know, there's an art to that. Should Donald Trump become president of the United States by being a talented communicator?
Yeah, in a less talented way, in my opinion. I mean, he was
I would agree.
A talented user of media rather than a talented communicator.
Are you suggesting that Niall would be a better president of the United States than Donald Trump? I think he would be.
He probably would be, yeah. But I'm just saying, no, Niall is a good speaker.
He's very good. He's a talented broadcaster,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was talking around the fringes of the pandemic. You know, and there's a bit of vaccine reluctance there. Mm-hmm. There's a bit of climate denial there. Mm-hmm. The way he approaches the migration issue, you know, would be a respectable way of approaching it, but from a right-wing perspective. And so there's talking points, and you know, it is fair to look at the political landscape and to say, if you're going to get into the debate and if you're going to get into politics, you know, this is where it's going. It's where it's going around the world, really. It's definitely where it's going in Europe. They're predicting the right-wing parties in Europe will be the biggest ones after this election. So, you know, let's chase those votes. And to some extent, the mainstream parties are doing it. Sinn Féin have been criticised for moving in that direction as well in some respects. I haven't done that. I wouldn't be interested in winning a seat on any other platform other than the values that I've held all my life. And they may not be fully de rigueur at the moment, who knows, but they're my values. And, you know, if that's what works for people,
Yeah,
then that's what works.
I got it. Briefly, as just before we move on to you, because I want Claire Daly, because she's also in the
she's an incumbent,
constituency.
Claire. Yeah,
Claire's a funny one because Claire is seen or portrayed by many in Ireland as a kind of, her and Mick as being almost apologists for Putin, etc. But then possibly in the world, the world at large, for example, receives great media coverage for her, scorching excoriation of Israel. In that speech that she did. Where would you stand on her principles, her values, as you mentioned a minute ago?
I think Claire's politics are very easy to figure out. What is America doing this morning, and whatever it is, I'm against it. I call it campism, where you reduce politics to two sides, and if you say something against Putin, it must mean you support Biden,
All right,
or NATO. I campaigned for Claire the last time, in 2019. I couldn't be in more disagreement with her on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think her voting record in the European Parliament on it is an utter disgrace. An utter disgrace. Apart from the fact that she hasn't done anything for Dublin in 5 years. But just on the question that you asked me, I think we're talking at a very dangerous time. I think in the part of the world we live in, the Northern Hemisphere at least, there are two competing imperialist blocs. I've opposed American imperialism my entire life, but we now have fascist imperialism in Moscow. And Vladimir Putin's warmongering didn't start in Ukraine. He's been warmongering for 20 years. And it's the week of the anniversary of the Normandy landings.
Yeah.
When the Allies, which included the Soviet Union at the time, heroically defeated fascism. And here we are with a fascist war. I think the only way to address that is to confront fascism and beat it. You do not appease fascism. Chamberlain found that out. You do not compromise with fascism. And if anybody thinks that giving Vladimir Putin a chunk of Ukraine is going to sate his appetite to rebuild the Soviet Union, but not as a Soviet Union, as some sort of fascistic demagoguery, then they're for the birds. He will regroup. He'll come after the rest of it. He'll invade Poland. He'll move north. He'll move west. He'll move wherever he moves because he's a fascist imperialist.
Yeah.
And that's so people will then say to you, well, how do you stop the war then? And unfortunately, we're in a situation where the only way to stop fascism is to beat it. And the idea, do you think they can compromise with it is for any leftist.
Yeah. Do you think they're trying to beat it?
Well, I think. You say, who are they now?
I suppose the other imperialist bloc, to use your language.
Well, I think you mentioned Israel there, and I wholeheartedly agree with Claire on Israel. And I think the current iteration of the 75, 80-year tragedy that is Palestine has worked in Putin's favour significantly. Because it has taken not only attention, but resources. War resources, and put them into the hands of Netanyahu and his genocidists. And I agree with Claire on that one, 100%. So we've got a situation there where the world is really in a difficult place, and we've an election coming up in the United States in November, and it's a toss of a coin by the looks of it. As to whether Biden, who's sponsoring genocide in Israel, so no brownie points there from me, or Trump, God knows what he'll do. Well, the war in Ukraine is over the day after, if Trump becomes president. So these are big issues. And we can maybe use our diplomatic voice, and I think we have done that to pleasantly surprising degree.
Yeah.
But I think one MEP cannot, out of 720 MEPs, stop this. And that, of course, brings to the centre, the militarisation of the European Union. And where does the European Union stand in all of this? And, we've Ursula von der Leyen, who effectively green-lighted the genocide, in my opinion, after the 7th of October. And I condemned Hamas. Another difference between me and Claire. I think what Hamas did on the 7th of October was abhorrent.
Yeah, and important that you should mention that. Yeah.
Absolute brutal act of terrorism on innocent people. And we have to be able to say those things. I don't have to pick my favourite imperialist. I don't have to pick my favourite war criminal. I don't have a favourite imperialist or a favourite war criminal. I don't think they're all good guys and bad guys. I'm looking for the good guys. I can't find any.
Yeah. Well, the good guys, you mentioned good guys.
Now, there's one looking at me.
Well, you mentioned good guys, which was 80 years ago, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, if they weren't all good guys, they were in pursuit of the better good.
Yes.
But those football pitches have changed now, because the guys who were the good guys 80 years ago are not really the good guys anymore. And that's coming from somebody like me, who would traditionally grown up in a world where the West were the good guys. And then, since maybe, since 2003, since the Iraq War, there's more and more evidence to suggest that the good guys are just another version of the bad guys. And the good guys are doing as many bad things as the bad guys are doing. And so that's a kind of, but you would have, I believe you would have always believed that anyway.
Well, I could go back to the overthrow of an end
exactly.
in Chile in 1973.
Yes.
I think there was absolutely no doubt that the Allies at the time, the Soviet Union, as I say, the United States, Britain, France, but the United States, Soviet Union and Britain particularly, defeated fascism, Nazism. And then, we all know what happened then. We had Berlin being split, and we had the Berlin Wall, and then we had the Cold War. And I think, American imperialism then, which is a kind of an economic imperialism. It's about resources, and it's about the uber capitalist ideology. So we had a situation where little countries in South America and Central America were popping up, Cuba being one that I know a little bit about, but it's only one of many, were popping up, making their own decisions about how they wanted to be run. And because it was seen as being on America's doorstep, it was, well, we can't have that working.
Yeah.
Why can we? There's been a 67-year blockade of Cuba, simply because America doesn't want, for a little island 84 miles away, to be seen to work with anything other than. So that's imperialism.
Yeah.
That's imperialism. And I mentioned Chile, and you talked yourself about, this made-up weapons of mass destruction stuff in Afghanistan and the efforts that were going after another apparent terrorist attack, by the way, which was the 9/11 in 2001. So we live in an awful world.
Yeah, okay.
And I haven't got a favourite baddie.
Okay, good. Now, Brendan, I want to talk about you. And, see, you are what's, you are one of the good guys. Now, what I mean by good guys is you are a person whose fundamental instinct is to help people who are at the bottom of the chain, the people who are repressed, the people who are the victims of social injustice, the people who are victims of gross inequity. This is your. This is a kind of an instinct you have. I'm interested in where that came from. What drove you in this direction? Can you remember being a young man feeling these urges? Can you remember when did it happen? I mean, listen, let's face it. We all choose our path in life, and most paths in life is broadly selfish. I mean, we've spent the last 2 weeks hearing about the death of one of Ireland's great business titans, Tony O'Reilly, and how much he did for Ireland, or how much he did for himself, and the successful marketing of himself as a brand. Now, you're not Tony O'Reilly.
You're not.
No, you're not. But what led you to pursue a life of activism? That's it.
I'd love to tell you some romantic story about being taught all these things at my father's knee or something, you know. It never happened. For some reason, I really get angry about injustice, or at least what I perceive as injustice. And I understand, by the way, that my perception of what's injustice isn't everybody's. I get that. But at least from my point of view.
So do I. So I want to know where that comes from and where. When did it come from?
Well, you know, my first known activism was in England when Thatcher was trying to privatise the railways, and I was a young man. And instead of going to pubs and doing other things, well, I did a bit of that too, but I would be as likely to be found attending a union meeting, planning a strike to fight Thatcher, and we lost that, by the way. She did privatise the railways, as down in Biddy Mulligan's, or at least before I went to Biddy Mulligan's, probably would be more accurate. And I liked the solidarity. And I don't mean that in any Marxist wrap the red flag around me way. I mean the togetherness of having a noble cause and having people with you who are in joint pursuit of that cause. I don't mean anything more lovely than that. I liked that. And then I liked going to Biddy Mulligan's afterwards with one or two of those people. And I didn't carry any anti-English baggage. Even though I came from Dundalk and I used to recoil once upon a time at even the sight of a Union Jack. It used to make me cringe just even looking at it. That's the way I was brought up. But when I was over there, I didn't have any, stick with the Irish thing. You know, people I was working with were English, by and large, and multicultural, actually, in London. And
you were Mick Lynch before Mick Lynch was Mick Lynch?
Well, I wouldn't claim that. So, the togetherness. And then when I come home, to me it was natural then. There's the bosses and there's us. That became ingrained in me through those strikes against Thatcher. And then when I came home in 91 and went in the railway here, so the same industry, I went into a completely different place. It was very militaristic. It was very top down. Just the way the railway used to be set up everywhere. But this kind of socialist thing must have happened in England somewhere along the line. And I just recoiled at the fact that people were being treated badly, and there was ballot rigging going on, and there was people fiddling things, and there was things not being... And I couldn't handle a situation in my head whereby there was a ballot of workers and somebody somewhere diddled it. And I'm not naming any names or any... That's what I was involved in. That's what I seen. And my brain kind of... Shoot, that can't happen. Well, it can happen. And I just said, well... fool that I was, maybe, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to speak about it. And then other people to speak, and then I spoke maybe louder than other people, and then I was asked to go out and speak for people. And I never sat down. You say people choose their own path. If I'd known the path I was going on, it's been a difficult few years now. If I'd known the path that I was going on, I'm 56 years of age now, maybe I was a bit stupid, actually. I'm not sure I would have picked this path. For all of the good experiences I've had, I'm not sure I would have picked it.
You just told me a minute ago that you've gone back out onto the streets.
Well, these values that I have now...
And it makes you feel alive.
It does make me feel alive. And fighting injustice makes me feel alive. But it'll make me feel alive because until I'm dead. Yeah. Because that's what I do.
Can I just ask you...
But it's not what I always did.
No, I just want to ask you, I'm jumping in a bit here, but are we becoming... Do you think, there are two schools of thought around this. One would be that, shut up, stop complaining. The world is getting more prosperous. We're better off now than we were in 1863, if you know what I mean. Okay. So is the world getting more unjust or less unjust?
Oh, definitely more unjust.
Okay.
Not necessarily since whatever time you mentioned there, pre-industrial revolution or whatever. But when I think of my children, and you want to talk about me, so I've got two children. Two beautiful girls in their 20s. and they live with their mum and Athlone. And I remember what I was doing when I was that age. I was dating. In fact, at my oldest daughter's age, I was getting ready to get married. I was saving the deposit for my first home. And I was looking forward to all the things that would bring. Family and contentment and all of that. And when I look at young people now, and I'm not just talking about a generational change in terms of people, are doing things at a different pace. People are staying in college longer now. And I'm not just talking about that. If you even allow a 10-year wriggle, maybe young people now should be doing in their mid-30s what I was doing in my mid-20s. Even if you allow for that. There's an enormous amount of young people who can't envisage themselves being able to have a home. I didn't say buy a home. Have a home of any sort. And have the decent job with the security, with a pension somewhere in the dim and distant future, with some leave, with some sick leave, things that I took not for granted. The CIE pension scheme's not an awful lot to write home about, by the way, but it's something. It gives you a little bit of security in the back of your mind. And the amount of people, young people now that are crying out for that, well, they're not crying out for it because they don't know it's possible, or that it once was possible. They don't know they've lost it because they never had it.
Which is worse.
I worry about that because that generation is living longer. We're all living longer now. Expectancy when I was that age was in the late 70s. It's the mid 80s now.
That's right.
So they're all living longer. And it seems to me that the share of the pie, to use that old hackneyed term, that the majority have is shrinking. But it's not just seems to me. Ask Oxfam. They've done research on this.
Yeah.
So wealth disparity is at levels that should not be tolerable in a civilised society. Now, I'm not saying we all go out there now with machetes or whatever we can get our hands on and take the mansions, take the big cars. I'm not advocating anything like that.
Have other people accused you of that?
No, but
I wasn't,
when you say
remotely
no,
going
I know
there.
You're not, but when immediately, and you haven't, but I want to be clear because people might say, "Oh, that will come." What I'm advocating is a redistribution of wealth downwards from the super rich. A tiny amount of it could change so many lives for the better, and that's just wealth. Then there's also the issue of ideology, because one of the reasons I'm running for the European Union is because I think there are better, I used to say best practice, but better practice solutions to issues affecting people in Dublin, elsewhere in Europe, that if you talk about here, you're looked at as if you're some sort of dinosaur.
Like?
Well, I went to Cologne recently and I met an Irish couple, young Irish couple, younger than me, and they used to live in Ainger Street up until 4 years ago. And they rented an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment in Ainger Street. I think they told me it was €1,400 a month. And they wanted to start a family. They both work in IT. They wanted to start a family. And they knew they wouldn't be able to start a family, pay that rent, and have what would then be childcare costs, even if they could get childcare, in Dublin. So they moved to Germany. Now, the woman is European. The man is Irish. So they moved to Germany and they now live between Cologne and Dortmund in a 3-bedroom house for €1,900 a month. They have a baby, they've started their family, and they have childcare which is capped at €140 a month, 5% of salary. It took me 1 hour and 15 minutes to fly there.
Yeah.
We have public housing in cities like Vienna, Antwerp, Berlin.
That's right.
We've healthcare free at the point of use universally across France, Germany. We've got programs in Portugal that's looking at inner city drug problems in Lisbon. We've got homelessness more or less solved in Helsinki. And what I'm saying is, I would challenge sometimes unspoken, but sometimes spoken narrative that all these problems we have are the same everywhere else. They're not. They might exist everywhere else. They're often worse here. And they're worse here because possibly because of the lack of diversity in government we've had for 100 years. The social solidarity sort of stuff, programmes that would come from a more mixed ideology government. We don't seem to get here. We're kind of on your own here.
Well, just to cut across you there for a second. I mean, there's no left anymore in Ireland.
Was there ever?
Well, I mean, I suppose if you go back to the days of Brendan Corish, maybe, Frank Kluski.
Long time ago.
Well, yeah, but they're within my lifetime.
Yeah, just about ours.
You have a touch of the left. And I mean, I don't mean a touch of the left. I mean, that's Tony Wedgwood Ben touch of the left, where you actually believe in trying to, bolster health services, bolster social services, etc. Fintan O'Toole wrote an interesting article this morning in the Irish Times where it kind of answered the question I'd already asked you. And it was about housing, and he said that when we were at our poorest in the late 80s, the homelessness number was at its lowest.
Yeah.
When we started getting richer in the 90s, the homelessness number went up. When we became really rich in 2004 and 5, the homelessness number went up and up and up. And now we're rich again, and the homelessness number is at its highest level ever. This is the implication that the richer we are, the more homeless we produce.
But it's not complicated why.
Yeah.
We used to have a situation where, and it wasn't controversial. We started off slagging Stephen Staunton. Stephen won't mind me saying this. Okay, I grew up at a council housing estate in Dundalk called Marion Park. It was about half a mile from where Stephen grew up. Stephen grew up in a private housing estate up the road. We went to the same school. We were in the same class. Were we friends? We sort of were friends. I broke a lamp on his bike with a tennis ball. He wasn't too impressed. That might have stunted the friendship. But we were friends. Our family were friends. And we knew each other and went to the same GAA club and whatever. And what point I'm making here is you had public and private living cheek by jowl beside each other. There was nothing controversial about it. And the kids grew up together and played football together and hung around together and married into each other's families, and the community grew. There was nothing controversial about it. And then at some point, I think it was in the 1980s or maybe the 70s, because I remember actually seeing the last council houses being built in Dundalk. They were being built in a place called Ashling Park, just across from me. And I can remember as a child playing football and, they're building houses. You don't see that now. So the state stopped building houses in competition to the private sector. So they handed the house building in its entirety over to the private sector. And it's not a controversial thing to say. It's not an ideological thing to say. What does the private sector do? It controls supply to push up price. That's what it does. It's not a thinking being. It's how it functions. It's how it sustains itself. And if there isn't something in competition with it to mitigate and regulate it, such as a public house building programme, to provide the alternative supply, then the prices will go up and up and up and up. And if you do that for 40 years, you arrive here. You arrive at a situation where 68% of the 25 to 29-year-old adults in this city are living at home with parents.
That's right.
That's horrendous.
It is horrendous.
And that's not the case in Europe.
No.
20% higher than the European average.
And you arrive at that situation where the two of the public servants who we need most, the guard and the nurse, who are married to each other, can't afford to live in their own capital.
And even worse, I've come across worse. If they manage to afford to live and it doesn't work out, and marriage breakups and all that happen, they can't afford to live apart. And we have all that pain and hurt and generational dysfunction of, we've all that stuff going on. And it's so easy fixed. We have state land, we have builders. Could we please have a state-owned construction company to build public housing, not to replace, but in decent and honourable competition with the private sector, to fix this problem?
Yeah.
What's wrong with it?
Is there a political barrier to that?
There's an ideological barrier with all of the parties. I say the only difference between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael is Fine Gael favour landlords slightly more than developers, and Fianna Fáil favour developers slightly more than landlords.
Yeah, right.
But that's the class
divide
that they operate towards, and it arrives at bizarre situations. And my values are interlinked with my experiences.
Yes.
That house we grew up in, there was 8 children in that house. It was a 3-bedroom house with a box room where my mum and dad slept. And then there was 2 rooms, they weren't any bigger than this, smaller than this actually, with 2 sets of double bunks. 4 girls in that room, 4 boys in that room. And a family of 8 was reared in that room, in that house. And that wasn't any different in most of the houses in the street. 7, 9, whatever you have in yourself, right? So years come on, those 8 children get married and have their own children, and then those grandchildren have their own children, and the parents get older. My father died in 2014, and around 2018 my mum had to go into a nursing home because she was of an age, she was having falls and whatever. So my mum went into the nursing home out the road, which became infamous during COVID, but we won't go there. And the house was left empty. And we had a situation where we had homelessness rising at that time, continuing to rise. And we had grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had no hope of getting on the housing ladder. And the house had to lie empty because it was in this fair deal. And we needed the house to help pay for my mother's care in the nursing home. Now, it doesn't seem to me to be a gargantuan leap to adapt the fair deal scheme to help families pay a little bit more on the basis that they bring the house onto the rental market for the period of time, which can be years. That doesn't seem like off the charts Marxism now.
No.
It just seems like common sense. But as my dad once told me, the bad thing about common sense is it's not that common.
Yeah.
Keep laughing there. It was a better joke than that.
We'll tighten up the edit. And then I'll add your laugh there. Back to this, right? Jumping back again. You did talk about Claire Daly for a bit. You said you would have supported her very strongly on the whole.
I am shocked at her position on Ukraine, to be honest.
Yeah, but you would have supported her on her whole position on Israel.
I do, yeah. On Palestine, yeah.
Yeah, and something... Well, I think it's a little bit extraordinary. You'll have to clarify this to me. Happened during your campaign with An Post.
Oh,
so you made
bringing it up.
You made some leaflets, and you were meant to distribute these leaflets. And in your leaflets, you mentioned the word Israelis and genocide. Isn't that right?
That's right.
And An Post took it upon themselves to say, well, those leaflets will have to be reprinted because you are not allowed to print these leaflets with us. Can you explain to me the legal foundation through which they did this?
No, I can't.
Yeah,
Explain the legal foundation. What basically happens, and you see, I don't have the numbers, I don't have the posters, we've touched upon that itself.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can design a flyer, and that flyer will be delivered by An Post. You have to pay for it now, but it will be delivered by An Post to all of the voting addresses in your constituency. I think it's 465,000 in the case of Dublin. Right? So, no, it's a flyer. It's just the rectangular shaped flyer that you're all getting in your homes. We're all getting in our homes. And so I designed it. And you have your face and you have your website and you have your vote for me and you have to leave a space on one side for your address to be stamped. And then on the other side, you put whatever you want to put. So some people have lots, some people have little. I think I tried to put 8 points.
Okay.
And 1 point was, and this was matching what... well, I think it's important that we give our views on the Palestine-Israel conflict because I think it's in the debate. I haven't seen the debate that it hasn't featured in it somewhere or other. So I said that I support a two-state solution and that I'm opposed to Israel genocide. That was it. And I was astonished that I got an email back from An Post setting out. An Post relies on a set of internally considered criteria, so there's no law, internally considered criteria. And they set out 6 criteria. And the first one is, are likely to cause embarrassment or distress to it, that's An Post, its employees, or the person who will receive the item who may be a child. And then there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 6 is, contains matter which does not relate to the election. So there's 6 criteria, and An Post say to me, with that in mind, and on the basis of 1 and 6 above, so I've read what those 2 are, Post would recommend that Brendan Ogle flyer should be requested to remove the references to genocide and Israel. So here I am. The only way I have of communicating with all of the people is to get that flyer into their homes and hope that some of them read it, because I know what I do with a lot of them, right? And imagine a lot of your listeners mightn't be any different. So I designed a flyer, and that's what I got back. So I had to take that sentence out of it. So now the people who are voting, if they're voting on my leaflet, don't know what my position on Palestine is. So I hope they're listening now.
It also harkens back to that thing you said about pleasantly surprised, you said, about Ireland's reaction and response to this.
Yes. Proud. I would go further. A little bit proud.
Yeah. And other people would feel like that as well, particularly when the inevitable and predictable backlash happened, which I could almost predict. In fact, I did predict. Wait and you see now, after Ireland makes this statement, about 3 days from now, you'll see, Israel making a statement, or the representatives of Israel making the statement, that the tech companies are becoming nervous.
Yeah, well, the American Chamber of Commerce should become nervous then. We're all very nervous.
Yeah. So that's why I thought it was a particularly brave statement to make, considering that you knew this was going to happen.
I have to say, our diplomatic voice, through the previous Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, Micheál Martin, and now Simon Harris, has been used to a fine extent, I think. Could always be stronger now, but I'm not going to be, using mealy-mouthed words just to criticise them for the sake of criticising them. I think we can be proud of the humanitarian advocacy that this nation, through its leaders, have put forward, given the genocide that I consider to be taking place in Palestine. And there are some we might agree on many things, but there are other things we need to be big enough to say. Yeah, it's good.
I wanted to ask you about something else. It's a much bigger point, and it might require that maybe some other time you come in and talk to me about this. If we think there's enough to flesh it out, but maybe you might give me a briefer answer now. I'm interested in injustice and inequality. I started, funnily enough, did you ever see the series Family Ties when we were younger?
Don't think so.
It was an American sitcom. Do you remember it, Ed?
Yeah.
Family Ties, Michael J. Fox. And Michael J. Fox was an interesting character because he was a young Republican. He was likeable. He was kind of hateable as well. But he was a young Republican. He was a Reaganite, kind of in college, and he was into making money. And his family were all a bit sick of him. He used to come home and they were kind of old hippies from the 60s. And they couldn't understand what kind of a monster their son had become, or so-called monster. But he was just, Dad, it's all about creating wealth and it all trickles down and everybody becomes rich. You've got to be, greedy. Greed is good. It was from the Greed is Good decade. And and funnily enough, when I started my journey through the world, I was slightly more on his side. The idea that it's all about going out there, making your mark, crushing the opposition. I didn't say that. But, making money, kind of becoming successful, let's say. And then, I started, pretty much, changing as I got into my late 20s and 30s and 40s. And I've gone more.
Became a human being, did you?
Yeah, just all it is. It's becoming a human being, really. Now, so I went the opposite of your classic route, that you're meant to start as a liberal and end up as a conservative. Yeah. I started as a conservative and ended up as a liberal.
Interesting.
And now I'm kind of going more and more down that end. And it's because I find the more I learn, the more knowledgeable I become, the less I know. But the more information I receive and the more history I read, the more it's unescapable for me not to empathise with people. It's empathy leads to more knowledge leads to empathy. And empathy leads to really understanding what the world is. And the world is unjust and unfair. And what really concerns me as well is that the world I live in, I know you'd be happy with talking about this, the capitalist ideology of the world we live in, isn't just the prevailing economic or political idea. It's linked with moral fabric as well. So the idea of being well off, richer than somebody, is religious. It is seen that you, as the rich person, are morally sound, morally right, morally good. The rich people are celebrated in society. Poor people are looked upon as being, well, why are you poor? What happened? Is it something you did? Oh, you won't tell me? Maybe it's something in your past. Maybe you're weak. In fact, that's it. You're either bad or you're weak. It's a religious thing.
Zealotry.
It's a religious thing. Our capitalism is bound up with morality. And to be good is to be strong. And by inference, productive capitalist. To be weak is to be a leech, a sucker, and a possibly a liar, and most probably a deviant. So anyway, that's my lecture. I wonder. I'm sure you have thoughts on that subject.
In order to make something better, you must always push up to power, because that's the only way change happens. And pushing up, just doing that, actually physically doing it, is much harder, physically and in every other way, than kicking down. So much so that the natural, normal impulse a lot of people have, I would say most people have, when they encounter injustice to them or to their family or to their community or to whatever, is to kick down. She got an increase, a pay increase. Why didn't I get one?
Yeah.
They got a house. Why aren't I getting a house?
Yeah.
Right? And that's understandable. I might even say it's human. It's instinctive. It's also easy and pointless. It's utterly pointless. When you come across injustice, to kick down at somebody for whatever reason who is in a worse position than you, and that's the nature of kicking down, that's how you define kicking down, they're in a worse position than you, is human, understandable, and utterly pointless. In fact, it's counterproductive, because that person is then inclined to do the same.
Yeah.
And we get a whole load of people who are disadvantaged going around kicking out and lashing out at each other.
And the only people who aren't being kicked are the people at the very top.
And it suits the people at the very top when we're all lashing out and kicking around.
Correct.
Each other. So to me, the really, really difficult thing, whether you're in a dispute, whether you're looking after a worker, whether you're in a strike, whether you're breaking into Apollo House, whether you're trying to solve tip theft, whether you're trying to win a train dispute, whatever you're trying to do, the really difficult thing is to find out what's the problem, where is the power overarching this problem, and how can I impact that? And that involves, and the thing about power is power has tentacles, power has voice, power has control, power has access. So the minute you start pushing at it, all of those things come at you. And suddenly you're under attack for speaking truth to power, or maybe doing more than speaking. So to me, to superimpose I suppose it's almost an ideology at this stage. If I could hand one lesson down to my kids or any young person, just one, it would be never kick down, always push up. But I tell you what, Mario, it's bloody hard. It's exhausting.
I'll ask you another question in relation to that. How far can you push up? Now, this is a really tricky question, because when you look at, for example, the women and their right to vote, okay, and the suffragettes, okay, did they just arrive outside and go, "Hi, we're women, we'd really like the vote, please"? And the men just went, "Yeah, no." So the women went, "Okay, bigger protest. We're women and we really want the vote." Nah. So then what did the women do? They had to raise the stakes. They had to raise the ante.
They had to jump on the horses.
They had to jump on their horses. They had to break windows. Civil disobedience. And I think this is a really interesting question in modern society. Because people, you're sick to the teeth of hearing conservative politicians going, "Well, of course, peaceful protest is of course very necessary. The free speech is wonderful in society. As long
Until
as
someone does it."
Yeah, and then they find a way to, well, he was blocking the traffic. People are trying to go to work and earn a normal civil day's pay. You say, what? Where? How, where? Because at some stage, to get at some stage, what I'm saying is, we have to follow the without me advocating breaking the law.
I've broken the law.
Yeah, but I'm
Did
not
you pay your
advocating.
water bill?
No, but I'm
You broke the law.
Yeah, so after I'm not advocating gross civil disobedience,
There you go,
criminal
guys.
disobedience.
Mario didn't pay his water bill.
So how far? Do you understand the point I'm making?
Well, I do, and I'm going to give it real context.
Okay.
In that joke I've just made, I don't care whether you paid your water bill or not, by the way. But I advocated that people would not pay their water bills. And I didn't pay mine. I did something else, though, in the water charges movement. Some people, very few, but it's become a thing now, some people thought it was okay to take protest beyond not paying your water bill and take it outside somebody's home. A minister's home or a politician's home or somebody that wanted water charges home. Back then, in 2015, 2016, 2017, it was very small, but it happened 2 or 3 times. And on each occasion I spoke against it. Now it's become commonplace for people to turn up outside politicians' homes. So there's an actual issue where there's a dividing line. And I don't think you can do that. I think there has to be, human decency overrides everything. There's nothing humanly indecent about me not paying my water bill. It's a bad law. The only way to stop it is not to do it. Right? But there is something humanly indecent about somebody turning up outside somebody's house where there's a family, somebody's family home.
Yeah.
And intimidate, because the only intention is to intimidate. If it wasn't to intimidate, they wouldn't do it. Right? So I think human decency is the key. Now, someone's human decency might be different to someone else's, but to me, if you've got good values and you've been reared well and you're simply trying to make a better world, push up against power, but do it in a way that's decent and honourable and principled and don't hurt anybody.
Okay. And one piece of advice to give to anybody who has an activist bone in their body, what would be the one piece of advice you would tell them? One.
I'm just going to repeat it again because I think it's the only one. Yeah. Never kick down at anyone more vulnerable than yourself. Ever. You're better than that.
All right. Brendan, thank you very much. The election is on this Friday. This is going out tomorrow. And you've heard Brendan Ogle, and it's up to you to make your own decisions now. He's running in Dublin for the MEP candidates. A lot of horses in the field. And he's not gambling heavily on himself at the moment. But this podcast could change everything. Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you, Mario. Pleasure.
And my thanks to Brendan Ogle for a compelling conversation. And honestly, Brendan is one of those people that I could take off with for another hour and talk about all sorts of things. Interesting in this day and age to meet somebody who really, really cares about the lives of ordinary working people and social justice. We don't see enough of it around. Thanks again to Brendan. You can contact me, of course, on mariorosenstock@gmail.com. I read them all and get back to most of them. And I'll be back same time, same place next week. Well, not really same time, same place. This went out a bit early. Normally we release the episode on Fridays. Okay, take care. Get out and vote if you can. Bye.